Hello, and nice to see you all. Welcome to our seminar looking at measuring and monitoring children and young people's mental well-being. Before we get into the meats and bones of the discussion, if you like, I just want to explain who I am. I am Lee Atkins, and I'm the Regional Improvement Support Officer for the Child Outcomes Research Consortium, or CORC. Before we go into the details, I'll explain a little bit about CORC and who we are and what we do. You'll see our vision is for all children and young people's well-being support to be informed by real-world evidence so that every child thrives. Our mission is to promote the meaningful use of evidence to enable more effective and child-centred support, services and systems to improve children and young people's mental health and well-being. So you can see the word evidence appears quite strongly in those things. That's what we're all about, is capturing evidence and using evidence and sharing evidence and what's working and how things are working. Also we talk about mental health and well-being, so we've got a very broad sort of spectrum. And I think what's important to me is to focus on what we're doing this for, really, and ultimately it's to improve children and young people's mental health and well-being. Okay, so we're using data and evidence, things like that, and sometimes that can get quite complicated, but ultimately we're here to improve the well-being and mental health of children and young people. CORC is a learning collaboration, so we are committed to learning together with services and schools and organisations actually, and to sharing that learning. So we're engaged in research and capturing evidence, things like that, and also to share the learning that we're taking place really, so we can all learn together, if you like. We are a collaboration, so we work with services, we work with NHS CAM services, voluntary sector services, schools, colleges, policymakers, researchers, all these types of things really to help that learning, to aid that learning, come together to learn together, if you like. A quick plug, we have a website, corc.uk.net, and I think it's great, and I think it's full of things you will find useful and really helpful, so please have a look, and you can access other seminars and tutorials. There are lots of resources to download, lots of links to resources, lots of reports and research papers, which I think you'll find really interesting reading. I have to say, we at CORC, we get emails and phone calls on a fairly regular basis for people asking for information, and we kind of often say, have you seen a website? It's kind of on the website. So if you've got any questions at all, the first point of call would be the website. So please go onto there. So we're going to cover it in the seminar, why measuring child mental well-being matters to schools, why it's important, why you should be thinking about it. We're going to be covering the different ways to measure child and mental well-being in schools, and importantly, the resources that are available to you to support you to measure your mental well-being in schools. Okay, so the three things we're going to sort of talk about the next sort of half an hour or so. So well-being itself covers a broad spectrum of different things, different ways of looking at well-being. There's a physical well-being element, there's a social well-being element, there's an environmental well-being element, there's an economic well-being element, and there's also an emotional and mental well-being element. So broadly speaking, how a person thinks and how they feel, so mental and emotional. For the purposes of today, I'm calling those two things mental well-being, if you like. So when we refer to that, that's what I'm talking about, emotional and mental well-being. Okay, there's many different definitions. If you read about it, look at it online, things like that, in books and things, you'll see different ways that it's explained and talked about. So we, or my partners and my colleagues and with partners, worked with young people to find out what their thoughts were on mental well-being and how they thought about it. So they came up with this quote, or this idea of looking at well-being, and they said, it's children and young people feeling good, feeling that their life is going well, and feeling able to get on with their daily lives. I think that's a pretty useful and pretty powerful kind of way of expressing it, and the word feeling comes out there a lot. It's really strong. So that's what we're talking about today. And interestingly as well, mental well-being is not the absence of mental health. Mental health and well-being are different things. When we talk about mental health, we are generally talking about recognisable or diagnosable mental health conditions such as anxiety, such as bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, psychosis, things like that. Whereas well-being is a much broader kind of spectrum underneath, if you like. What is also interesting is that it is possible to have very good mental health but very poor well-being. Also the opposite, it's very good well-being and very poor mental health. So the two things can work in opposite directions as well. But just for now, I think we'll leave it there. Leading up to today, there's been lots of discussion in the media and between services, things like that, about what's schools' role in actually promoting well-being of pupils. And I think what we're finding is there is ever-increasing recognition that well-being is important to schools. Important because it links to the engagement of pupils, the achievement of pupils, it links to exam results, it links to young people making informed and positive decisions, and young people feeling safe and taking care and avoiding danger as well. So I think we all know it's kind of important. There's lots of discussion about the importance of it. The discussion here is about what schools can do about it, what can schools do to support well-being. And recently, the discussion has been around, should league tables reflect wellbeing scores, if you like, in schools? So if schools are measuring wellbeing, should league tables actually publicise their results, things like that? So I'm not going to attempt to go into that discussion today. It's one to be had elsewhere, and to hear what you think on that. Okay. So what we're finding at Cork is there are more and more programmes and a diverse range of programmes that are being put in place to support young people's wellbeing. What we're finding in schools is typically mindfulness classes, peer mentoring support, counselling in schools, art therapy, sports therapy, animal therapy. There's lots of different things, and it's really exciting. But how do schools get insight and knowledge, a sense of what their strengths and challenges are in their school population? How do they know what the needs are? How do they know which of the pupils in a school cohort are the ones that need support the most? And ultimately, how do they know if the support they're providing, the interventions they're doing, such as the peer mentoring or the counselling, or it might be, how do they know if that's helping or not, or to what extent, or which pupils is helping? And kind of the answer to that question is by measuring mental well-being in schools, and that's what we're going to talk about today. There's some very clear guidance and policy directives on measuring well-being. The Public Health England say formally defining need can inform commissioning decisions for schools, school clusters or local authorities. Evaluating will tell you if activities and interventions actually work to improve well-being and whether they are worth the investment. Ofsted say assessing and responding to learners' emotional health and well-being needs and their impact on the learning and capacity to learn relates to all key judgment areas. Department of Education, schools should collect routine outcome data to assess the impact of counselling on the child or young person and the effectiveness of the service as a whole. So some very clear kind of policy guidance there. But we think it's also important to think about these 4 reasons why measuring mental wellbeing outcomes is really important. First of all, number 1, understanding what is happening in your school. So to get a picture of what the needs are within your school and what the kind of wellbeing issues they've got in your classrooms. Measuring wellbeing can allow you to demonstrate the effectiveness of what you're providing. So some of those interventions I mentioned earlier, the peer mentoring, the mindfulness classes, things like that, by measuring you demonstrate how they're helping. Obviously, they allow you to continually improve what you're offering to pupils as well. Finally, I think what's really important, what we at Cork keep talking about really, is that by measuring outcomes, you're able to support and improve interactions with pupils and young people, but able to understand what their needs are. And I think for many children and young people, it can be difficult to communicate how they're feeling or what their needs are. So by measuring and by using some of the tools we're going to talk about in a second, you're enabling the voice of young people to come through quite strongly and help them be at the centre of their support, if you like. So we'll keep talking about those things as we go out today. The way we measure mental health and well-being is by using what are called outcome measures. They come in a variety of different formats and different shapes and sizes. Generally they are questionnaire based, and they are completed by either a young person or by a parent or teacher, different forms, things like that. They measure a range of different things. Some measures are very specific to anxiety, depression, or areas they're trying to measure. Some things are much broader, like wellbeing measures, so there are lots of different measures. But what's really important, I think, to recognise is the measures we talk about today on our website and things like that have all been through a process of research and validation and testing, so we can be sure that the information we get from these questionnaires, these outcome measures, is important, is significant. It's telling us important information, if you like. A number of years ago, I decided to write my own because I thought, actually, I can do this, which is great, got an outcome measure all written, but actually, how did I know the results of using it were valid or strong enough to tell me what I needed to know, actually? And without that research, you can't. So we recommend using validated and standardised measures for that very purpose, if you like. So we're going to talk about some of these today, give some examples in due course. But before we do that, we have a toolkit for schools and colleges which is available to download from the Anna Freud website and the Cork website. This has been produced with the Public Health England, with Anna Freud and the Evidence-Based Practice Unit, Anna Freud and Cork. It is a toolkit that's free to download, as I said, from the Anna Freud website, Cork website, and it covers all of what we're talking about today, plus lots more. Lots of links to tools you can download as well and use, so it is free. So of course I urge you to download that and use that to help. So when measuring mental well-being in schools, we talk about the 7 steps, if you like, and I think, as is most often in these sorts of things, step 1 is kind of the most important, really. That's about understanding why you're doing what you're doing, what is the purpose of it, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to get from it, really, and that kind of dictates what you need to measure. It dictates who provides that information. So is it information from the pupils only, or actually you're going to combine that with teachers' information, parents' information, or three, or two, whatever it might be. So who provides the information? When and where and how will you collect the information? Is it going to be on paper, electronically? Where's it go? Where's it stored? Things like that. And what I'm really passionate really about number 7, I think, is what next? What happens with that information? What decisions will be affected by that information? Who will see it and how will it drive improvements, things like that? How will it be used to inform decision making? How will people see it and how will it make things better for young people? Okay. We're going to talk about the 3 different approaches you can take to measuring well-being now and go through each of these in a little bit of detail in a second. But broadly speaking, we're going to talk about one purpose for measuring well-being is evaluation. This is really to consider the impact of whole school, college and targeted interventions to understand how an intervention is working or not with a group of pupils or whatever it may be. Okay. Another purpose for measuring mental well-being is for identification, to identify the pupils in a school, in a classroom that needs the help the most. Lastly, you can do a snapshot. This is to get an understanding on a whole group aggregated basis, a whole school basis, whole year basis of the needs of your schools or classrooms, things like that. And that can inform service needs, can inform planning and resourcing, can also inform Ofsted evidence, things like that as well. So all 3 of these approaches are being used at the moment. I'm going to give you some examples of how they're being used at the moment. And I think they're all very important and all have different things to think about. So let's go through them now. So first of all, evaluation. As I said before, this is to kind of understand and to be sure that the intervention you put in place is helping the children and young people. Okay. So obviously the findings from evaluation are going to help you improve what you're providing as well, and they can help you inform planning decisions, resourcing decisions, funding decisions, things like that. And generally speaking, when you're evaluating, you're measuring what you want to measure. So for instance, well-being at the beginning of an intervention and at the end, and you're seeing hopefully a change in that well-being score as a result of your intervention, if you like. Sometimes you'll measure in between beginning and end, so you get sort of a change or track, a change, whatever it might be, to get more information, and that's great, but generally it's kind of before and after. So when embarking on evaluation process or purpose or approach to measuring mental well-being, think about what is the information you need to know whether that intervention is working or not. How will you know if it is positive? So the mental well-being measure that you use may give you part of the picture. You may also want to consider what teachers think, or what parents think, and involve all those different perspectives on the situation as well. There are some very practical considerations when embarking on evaluation. So we talked about the beginning and the end of an intervention. Now, for some things, that's very clear. You've got a 12-week art therapy class, so the beginning and end. But actually, some pupils might finish at week 8 or week 7, so for the end for them could be early on, actually. So think about when the beginning and end might be. For counselling or peer mentoring, how many sessions is the end? You might plan on 6 or 8, but it finishes after 3. So some thought on what the beginning and end is. And what's really important then is who will capture the data and where will it be stored and who will collate it and how will that be seen. Okay? Who's going to analyse that data? You have all this data sitting on a computer somewhere, who's going to look at it? And to go one step further, how will you compare your data to doing business as usual, to doing nothing, if you like? So interventions happening alongside another group who are doing something different, how can you compare? So you can measure different cohorts as well to compare. I think that's a good technique. As an example, Rochdale Healthy Schools, they undertook an evaluation exercise using the Sterling Children's Wellbeing Scale. They used the scale at the beginning with their target group, and then after the sport activities they did it again and looked at the change in scores. What is interesting, I think, about this, and what they told us they found interesting, was that they need to highlight the need for resources to administer the measure. Okay, so there's a need to actually have admin resources to collect the scores, to put the scores in the system, to analyse the scores, and to produce reports. Okay, they also told us it's really important to have clear explanations for children and young people completing these questionnaires. They need to know why they're doing it and what will happen with their data. Actually, some feedback to them at the end as well about what it means to them as well. So that's something we're going to keep talking about as well. That need to kind of talk to young people, involve young people in the process is really important. I mentioned the Sterling Children's Wellbeing Scale, and here it is to have a quick look at. It is downloadable from the court website, and it's in the PHE toolkit as well. So please have a look at that yourselves. It is designed to use with children between 8 and 15 years, and it has such wording as, I think good things will happen in my life. I've always told the truth. And the young people completing this scale can mark never, not much of the time, some of the time, quite a lot of the time, all of the time. So I've got 5 sort of options there to answer these questions here. So I always share my sweets. I've been cheerful about things. So this is a tool that Rochdale Healthy Schools use to measure wellbeing. So your thoughts on that would be useful. The second purpose for measuring mental wellbeing is identification. This is to kind of identify which pupils in your cohort need the support the most and why. Typically, this is done using what we call mental health screening tools, which we're going to talk about in a short while. But what we're talking about today is not diagnosing a mental health condition at all. What we're talking about is getting an indicator of who might need support. So some of these mental health tools are used by CAMHS services in conjunction with other tools actually to say, actually, we're going to recognise this mental health condition, okay? We're not talking about that today, we're talking about to identify support measures, if you like, for young people, support needs for young people. It's important to have checking conversations with those pupils as well, because a measure only tells you one bit of the jigsaw, if you like, one piece of the jigsaw. Having conversations with the pupils as well will try to fill that kind of the gaps in, if you like, and get a clearer picture of what's happening in a young person's life. Things to think about if you're going to embark on identification. Who will you use the questionnaire with? Is it the whole school population? Is it whole school years? Is it certain cohorts of pupils that will be carrying out the questionnaire, and why? Make sure that there is training for staff put in place as well, so staff can introduce the questionnaire, can explain to young people why it's important. You always get better results, and young people are always brought into the process a lot more if it's explained to them and it's important to them and they get some feedback on it. Obviously train the staff in interpreting the data you get from them using the measures in the schools, and also think about ethical issues, things like consent. So will parents get letters home consenting to be involved in this, and will pupils be consenting, or can they withdraw consent to be involved in it as well? Things to think about. And as I said before, that's sort of stage 7 in that process really, is what we're going to do with the information, who will see it, and what we do with it, I think is really important. Cheltenham College in Gloucestershire did exactly this. They used the Warwick and Edinburgh Emotional Wellbeing Scale, which I'm going to show you in a short while. And they did it across a whole cohort of students, and they used it to signpost to identify which pupils need support and to signpost them into appropriate support as well. And they found that really valuable actually. What they told us was what's really important to use the measure in conjunction with other discussion, other knowledge to put that support in place. It is not absolute fact. The outcome measures is not going to tell you exactly 100% situation, and I guess some of the analogies I've used in the past is that in physical health, you can go to a hospital and get a blood test, or a doctor and get a blood test. It'll tell you how many blood cells you've got, how many white blood cells you've got, and it could be quite accurate. Whereas these tools we're talking about today, these well-being measures and things like that, they are proxies for information. They are give you an idea of well-being, of how a young person feels and thinks, things like that. They are never perfect, but they are pretty good tools. So always use them in conjunction with other information you have. And obviously you can use measures as well to monitor progress as well. You don't just do it at beginning and end. You can keep doing them every 6 months, every year, and can see how things are changing across your school and cohorts, if you like. The Department of Education recommends using the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire, the SDQ, which I'm going to talk about in a minute as well. So without much ado, the Warwick and Edinburgh Emotional Wellbeing Scale. This is the full version. I think there's 14 questions on this questionnaire. It's a well-used tool. Lots of services are using it. And the sorts of things, sort of statements ask children, young people to rate themselves on, 1 to 5, are, I've been feeling optimistic about the future. Now, I think that first one's very interesting because it's got the word optimistic in there, and I don't know, some pupils may not be clear on what optimistic means and how they understand that optimistic is, so it highlights the need for explanation, actually someone to actually explain what it is. Because this is kind of used between children aged over 11 and adults as well, if you like. But have a look at it yourselves, have a look at the questions and see how valuable you think it is for the results that you want and what you want to measure and things like that. The other outcome measure that I spoke about was the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaires, suitable for children aged between 11 and 17. There are parent versions of this as well for parents to complete about their child. And there are teacher versions for those younger as well. You can download this, it's linked to our website and things like that. So you can look at some of the statements it says here. I try to be nice to other people, I care about their feelings, I am restless, I cannot stay still for long. And then down at the bottom, I am kind to younger children, I am often accused of lying and cheating. So I'd say this is a little bit more precise than the Warwick and Edinburgh scale. And actually some of the results you get from this, you can look at in terms of 5 subscales, which include emotional symptoms, conduct problems, hyperactivity and attention. and peer relationship problems plus pro-social behaviour as well. So it kind of gives you an indication of where the needs are with a young person as well. This STQ has a very clear threshold, and therefore it's used between schools and mental health services, whereas pupils score over a certain score, they're deemed to have passed the threshold, and they need more targeted intervention, targeted counselling type support as well. So when we talk about thresholds and CAM services, that's kind of what they're talking about really, is kind of the score you get from STQ. So it can be a very useful tool for doing that. You can score these questionnaires by hand on paper, or you can score them online at stqinfo.com. So you can put the data in, it tells you the results as well, so that's really useful. Another well-used tool, most or many services use this tool, so there's a massive data set around available for this, so we can compare data and actually analyse data, and actually tells us a lot of information. So it is worth thinking about having a look at this questionnaire. As with all these questionnaires, there is no one questionnaire which is perfect. There's no questionnaire which tells you everything you need to know. So this is just an example of one which is well used. It is good for certain things, but for other things you probably wouldn't use it. So bear that in mind. And the final approach to measuring mental well-being is the snapshot approach. This is kind of used to identify needs or strengths across a whole cohort. So you're taking a snapshot, a temperature check, a picture in time of your student population, if you like. And we use this, or has been used, to plan prevention work, inform decisions for planning and funding and resourcing, and to provide evidence of good practice. Things to think about before you do a snapshot approach to measuring well-being is understanding which students will be involved and why. You're doing the whole year group, whole school cohort or classroom, whatever it might be. Will you get a big enough number of students filling in these questionnaires to give you enough data? Because generally, the more data, the more reliable that data is. So small sample sets, so 10, 20, less reliable than 100 or so. Will the information be anonymised or not? If it's a snapshot, do you need to know which pupils are responding, or do you just need to get a picture? Okay. If it is anonymised and you get results back showing you've got urgent need for support, how will you know which pupils need that support? So things to think about really. Issues of consent communication. So how will you communicate to pupils about what you're doing and why you're doing? How will you communicate to parents about what you're doing and why you're doing? And how we get consent in to do that, if you like. And as I've talked about before really, is think about what will you do with the data, how it will be stored and who will see it, who will analyse it, who will report on it, and what decisions will be made on the back of it, if you like. Okay. As an example of Snapshot, I want to talk about the Head Start programme, because it's a really exciting programme. This is a national programme. It's funded by the Big Lottery Fund, and we're in stage 3 now, just embarking on stage 3. So the next 5 years, this is stage 3. So across the 6 partnerships of the UK, we've got Cornwall, Newham, Kent, Wolverhampton, Blackpool, and Hull, I think, the 6 partnerships. They're all engaging in lots of different, a diverse range of well-being and resilience education things in schools, if you like, all doing different things like peer mentoring, resilience classes and all sorts of things, community work. And what they're all committed to doing is testing and learning. Testing out these activities, measuring the well-being of pupils as they go through the resources, the interventions, and learning from them. Okay, so we're going to have lots of information from these 6 partnerships because they're all completing the Common Measurement Framework. We call it the CMF. This is essentially 4 or 5 questionnaires, outcome measures put together in one survey. This survey is being administered online, so pupils can complete it in their schools in the computer room, and all the results are stored with University of Manchester and with Anna Freud analysed, and then the information sent back. It will obviously allow us to understand the well-being and resilience of children and young people over time as well, because we're going to carry out this questionnaire with pupils throughout every year 9 for the next 5 years. And obviously, we're also going to carry it out with year 7 pupils going through to year 8, to year 9, to year 10 as well. So we'll see a changing time using this information. The Common Measurement Framework, the CMF, I said it's about 4 or 5 questionnaires put together. It includes about 90 to 100 questions, okay? But that actually makes it really robust. It's a really important kind of survey. Generally speaking, the more questions you have on a particular area, the stronger the results are, if you like. So 1 or 2 questions asking about well-being wouldn't be very powerful, but actually many would be. The CMF measures well-being and resilience as well, so some resilience things in there as well. So it's going to be a pretty powerful tool. It has been tested on pupils in schools as well, and the average time it takes is 18 minutes. It's an average. So the longest time it took, I think, is 35 to 40 minutes, and that was with a group of students with learning difficulties as well. So it has been tested out in those sorts of environments and those sorts of ways. And what's really good about it is kind of starts conversations between schools and commissioners and local authorities about what the picture is at their school and what their needs are. It really helps understand lots of different things. So it's a real powerful tool at the CMF. And what's really good, it's available for you to look at the moment in speaking, for you to use in your schools. So if you or your schools are interested in actually completing or using the CMF in your schools, then please do go to corkanafreud.org. Okay? And what you'll get is, at the time of speaking, free support to administer the CMF. So guidance, notes, consent forms will be sent out to you, so you know how to use them. Schools can access the electronic survey online, so pupils can do it on the computer room online. The data will go to Anna Freud, and it will be analysed, and the information will be sent back to the school. So you get a report back on your school, which you can use to think about, comparing it to other schools and authorities as well. So I think that's a really good offer. It's a really good tool. So really excited about the information coming back from the CMF. And over the years, I think it should build and build and build. So get very excited about this. So please do check out the website or email corkanafreud.org to find out more. Okay, so whatever approach you decide to use, whether it's evaluation, whether it's identification, or whether it's a snapshot approach to measuring well-being, there's some very important things to think about before you do this. And we asked young people themselves about what they thought of measuring well-being and using measures, things like that, to kind of get their insights into it. So a group of young advisors told us that by measuring well-being, you're sending a very clear message that you're taking it seriously, it matters. You understand how important well-being is to the pupils and how it relates to their wider learning and their wider success potential and things like that. It opens up conversations about well-being. It allows young people to talk about well-being, to understand about well-being, gives them a language to talk about well-being as well. I think it's really also supports education around well-being. You're educating them about what well-being is, what it's made up of, how it can be developed and enhanced and things like that. So these are very clear directives and very clear sort of guidance for young people about measuring well-being and how important it is. They told us that when you're introducing outcome measures and things like the CMF and some of the things we spoke about earlier, the wellbeing scale, the SDQs, whatever it might be, it's really important to explain why. Okay? We need to know what it's for, who will see it, and what difference it will make. Sounds obvious? It's also important to choose where carefully. So the kind of analogy the students have used here is obviously it's not an exam. You don't want to set people up in an exam type scenario and doing it. It's not a test really. It's about checking in about how they're feeling and how they're doing and things like that. So the way it's explained is really important and really powerful. Of course, be prepared. Be prepared to, I always talk about having a script. Practice what you're going to say to pupils, how you're going to explain it to them, and then what you'll do with information, who will see it, and also practice how you're going to explain the feedback to them as well. So some of the things there, who has been asked to complete it, who will see the information, how will it be used and who will get feedback, and who should I talk to if I've got any concerns or issues or need support around it as well. Okay. There's some very clear logistical things to think about before embarking on measuring mental well-being. I recommend have a look at the questionnaires. I've mentioned 3 today, but there are many more. So the Sterling scale, the Warwick Edinburgh scale, the SGQ, download them, have a look, fill them out for yourself as well, so get familiar with them. Think about maybe some words. I mentioned optimistic earlier. Think the words you might need to explain to pupils as you're carrying them out as well, so you're prepared for those sorts of things to think about. Think about, again, plan how you're going to introduce the measures, and talk about honesty and openness as well, make everything very clear to the pupils, nothing being hidden from them. Think about how you're going to give feedback to the pupils as well, how you interpret the scores for them as well. Important to think about how you might respond to any potentially risky issues, so any safeguarding things it brings up, any self-harm or suicidal thoughts, things like that, some real dangerous sort of signs there, and how will you do that, what things in place to do that as well. And of course, how are you going to record the data, where's it going to be kept, who's going to see it, and have you got consent to do that. The principles for doing all this are quite clear for us. We talk about no measurement without meaning. There is no point going through steps 1 to 6 without having step 7 sorted out. So understand what you're going to do with the information. So essentially, there's no point measuring something for measuring's sake. When you've got the data, what will you do with it? What is the meaning for doing it? And who will see it? Have informed consent. So make sure we explain to young people, to children, to pupils about why you're using these tools and what we do with the data and give them feedback. Think about the welfare of children and young people. I generally say there are some cases where it may not be appropriate to use an outcome measure. So for example, if a child or young person is in distress, it may not be appropriate to ask them to complete a questionnaire. Having said that, though, I do know there are services in the UK that are using measures with young people in distress, and they're working very well, actually. So it's not always the case, but actually you will know best if you're completing these with pupils whether it's appropriate or not. Okay. Of course, no piece of information gives you everything you need to know. These outcome measures are just one piece of a jigsaw. Okay, so professional judgment is interesting, it's important there, teacher judgment, parents judgment as well, talking to the young people yourselves is really important. Outcome measures and outcomes data gives you one big piece of the jigsaw, if you like, but not the whole piece, not the whole jigsaw. Before I wrap up, I want to highlight some resources available to you to actually do a bit more reading, to access support on embarking on these ways of measuring wellbeing. I mentioned the toolkit earlier on. This is the website here for you to go to and download the toolkit, and it has much more information about what I've talked about today for you to look at and read and digest, things like that. We'd love you to sign up to the Schools in Mind network. I'm going to talk about that just before we go in a second. Also, please do check out the Cork website. What's exciting at the moment with Cork is we have a new network membership option which is free for everyone. Essentially we want to engage as many people as possible in this kind of learning about mental wellbeing and mental health of children and young people and what's working in there. So we're building a database of network members, if you like. So please go onto the Cork website, sign up, it's free, and you'll get newsletters, you'll get access to latest reports and things like that, and you'll get people like me sending you emails and things, so please do that. Really exciting as well is the Youth Wellbeing Directory. You can go on to youthwellbeing.co.uk and it prompts you to put in a postcode, and it will tell you of all the wellbeing services available within that postcode, if you like, which is kind of exciting. Young people can use it as well. You can talk to young people about it. If you are a service and you're not on the website, then you can contact them as well to get yourself put on there. And the more people do that, the better the website is. So I urge you to do that. So please do so. Okay, I mentioned the Schools in Mind network. We'd love you to go onto the Anna Freud website or email schoolsinmind@annafreud.org and sign up to be part of our network of school staff and professionals as well who are interested in what we're talking about today. If you do that, you will get lots of communications about training and research opportunities as well. You'll become involved in a discussion about what's working in schools and how things are working, and also access opportunities as well, and get involved in the conversation about mental wellbeing in schools as well. So please do that. That's it for me today. I hope you will go into those sites and do some further reading, because I think I covered quite a big topic in quite a short time. This gives you a flavour of what we're talking about. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you very soon.